have our panel discussion now. So this is our panelists ready and waiting. So Lena Berg of MAN Sweden, Sylvia Fein, DGfPI Germany, Iris Luarasi, CLWG Albania. Of course, we met Iris earlier, and Sabrina Meechem from SafeLives UK. I would just like to give a brief introduction of each panelist. So Lena Berg is a method developer and curator for the Swedish organization MAN, that's Men for Gender Equality. The focus of Lena's work and research is both on men's violence against women and issues relating to youth, sexuality, and violence. Lena, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Sylvia Fein is a Deputy Executive Director of the German Society for the Prevention and Intervention of Child Abuse, Neglect, and Sexualized Violence, and is also involved with the prevention of cyber sexual violence and the counseling of minors affected by this. Sylvia, you're also very welcome. Iris Luarasi has 20 years experience leading the CLWG in Albania, a national helpline for female victims, that's both women and girls, of domestic violence and trafficking. In 2012, a counseling line was also set up for men and boys. And as we heard earlier, of course, Iris is the president of Grevio. So Iris, you're very welcome. And Sabrina Meechem is a doctoral candidate and researcher for SafeLives, a UK charity aiming to end domestic abuse for everyone and for good. Sabrina researches the impacts of environmental influences on young people's experiences and well-being, and is currently working on the Verge of Harm project to identify supports needed. Sabrina, you're very welcome. Okay, these are the questions we are putting to our panelists. So question number one for you, Lena. What are the specific challenges of working with young people who act abusively as opposed to adults?
I would like to start with how they have relationships. They have short ones, and they change partner often, and they don't live with the partners, they live it with the parents. So that's a very different thing from adult perpetrators. And they have more, talking more to the friends. Carolina was into that as well. And so the parents don't know anything, but they have a lot of grown-ups around them, but they don't talk to them. So that's one difference. So should I go on? Or yeah?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, social media, I think that is a different thing as well. It's a more abuse going on social media. And when you're meeting a grown-up man, then you can go through the children, and then their way of motivating them to end violence and change their life. But with when we are working with young guys, they don't have children, so how to motivate them? That's quite difficult. So we're doing that and talking a lot about values. What do you want with your life? How do you want to be a partner, and so on.
Okay, Lena, thank you for that. So what I hear you saying is that often young people have short relationships, that they often live with parents. You mentioned the abuse on social media and the difficulties in how to motivate young people. Yeah. Okay, thank you. The same question to you then, Sylvia.
Yeah, I'm speaking as a representative of an interprofessional association. You can't hear me? Oh. So I have to speak English and loud. That's really so. Okay, again, I'm speaking as a representative of an interprofessional association that is engaged in child protection. So our members are working with children who suffer violence or who are watching violence, for example, domestic violence of their parents. We organize nationwide trainings to professionals to improve their expertise in counseling, supporting children who suffer violence. I want to focus on sexual violence as one of the forms of violence that young people experience and that young people perpetrate. The topic of intimate partner violence in early relationships touches on 3 issues in the area of sexual violence. Sexual violence against peers, young people whom the age difference is not great, and sexual.
Sorry, just to clarify that, sexual violence amongst peers.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amongst peers.
Amongst peers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And sexual violence in relationships, namely close relationships. Yeah. So perhaps in this moment I would say we in Germany we really say against peers, so that it's not just a thing between, so the one is violent and the other not, and so on. So it's sexual violence against peers, against young persons in at the same age.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Sylvia. So just to summarize that, so some of the challenges the young people witnessing the abuse of parents towards one another, and the sexual abuse against peers.
Yeah.
Were the main points there. Okay, thank you for that, Sylvia. Same question then to you, please, Iris.
Thank you. I think that IPV, it's common and it affects so many million of people. Studies shows that 1 in 4 women or 1 in 10 men are subject of intimate partner violence. IP, it starts early and it continues through the lifespan. So many studies also show that it starts for many before they become 18 years old, like they enter into the adult period of the life. But some teens are suffering more. And so we could also make this distinction of the groups of the people that are in the teenage period and they are suffering more. So I would say that female teenagers, they are more victims than the male teenagers. But also the LGBTQ group, they are also the more victimized groups than the other groups. It is called also in so many countries like teen dating violence. I think that you've heard the term. And it happens like it happens with the norm with all other forms of violence. Like it happens online, it happens offline, and it happens through technology.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that, Iris. So some of the points there, it starts early and it continues through a lifespan. Teens are suffering, especially females, and also a mention of the LGBT community. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Sabrina, then, same question to you.
So I want to think about some of the ways that we work with young people when they come into services and some of the challenges we have with that. So one of the big challenges I'd say is the referral pathways that we have with young people. Obviously the referral pathways we have with adults, we know that we tend to go through housing or through social services or through the police. But a lot of these will look quite different when we're working with young people and intimate partners. Social services might pick up child to parent violence, but the chances of that picking up IPV in young people is a lot lower. We'd expect them then maybe to go through schools because that's where young people are for a lot of their daily lives. But schools often, these referral pathways aren't as strong with schools. And schools don't have the time to look into these things as much. There's so many things that teachers are already having to do. Teachers will often not even get through the whole of a curriculum in a year. So asking them to be able to look into each child can pose quite a challenge. Do I have?
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you, Sabrina. So some of the points, the referral pathways. So recognizing the early warning signs, schools, teachers not having time to look into the particular issues with children. Okay, thank you for that. Question number 2 then, What is working well now in engaging young people who act abusively as opposed to adults? So Lena, we're back to you here.
Okay. And we at the organ NGO Men, we have done a guide for counseling that we training professionals to use. And when we receive some feedback from them, they're talking about the parts in this guide that is about how doing relationships. We're talking a lot about to reflect on expectation of love relationships, how to take emotional responsibility in a relationship, how to do this role-taking part, how to mentalize, and that is themes that I have been talking about with other adult men as well, but not so deep. And we are helping them to go deeper into this. And that they talk about the effect with the man they have been talking to is that they're going to be being better in understanding and putting on the other's shoes and taking the other's perspective, and that makes it more easy to understand each other. So that is one thing that is a very important.
Is working well.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think so. Yeah.
So the work with young people there in motivating change. So young men, sexual consent, encouraging empathy and listening is the points there. Okay, thank you for that, Lena. And the same question to you then there, Sylvia, please.
Yeah, I would like to take the chance to introduce our training we offer to professionals in the youth system. It is called modularized advanced training for victim fair and victim just perpetrator work. So it's a victim orientated version of perpetrator work. And so myself is I'm coming from I have been working as a counselor in a victim orientated counseling service with girls and women who suffered sexual violence as a child. And so I know what it means, the victim orientated work with victims, but also in this training, it's victim orientated perpetrator works. So one aim of this curriculum is to make the responsibility clear. Who is responsible for the violence? And this is the first step you to make, that the young person who is motivated to commit sexual assault or has done it, and he manipulated and or exploited the external circumstances. So it's not the focus on it. The external circumstances are responsible that he committed the sexual assault, but otherwise. So he is responsible for, or he or she is responsible for what he committed.
Okay.
And
so what we're looking at there is
Yeah,
training
very
to
short.
professionals, victim orientated, and making that responsibility very clear to the perpetrators.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question, same question, sorry, to you, Iris.
For me, it is like very hard to distinguish, and it's like a thin line when teenagers are calling names and they are teasing each other, because how do you think that this is just positive teasing and this is harmful teasing? Even as a parent, I think we have this problem, and I'm a mother of 18-year-old son and a 15-year-old girl. And even when they are like teasing each other, you don't know yourself as a parent, like where it is this thin line that it's overpassing and it goes into the harmful direction. So I imagine that it is the same thing for the teachers at the school. And they don't sometimes, they want to interact, but they don't want to interact because they will feel like old people in the environment of the young teenager society. So that's why I think that it is very healthy that engaging young boys in this way of developing a vocabulary, that it is nice, it's cool, but it's not harmful. It's also a very positive way of engaging them when it comes for intimate partner violence vocabulary.
Yes, okay, all right. So difficult to know when the interactions between young people are crossing the line a little bit. Sometimes it could be inappropriate, but even as parents, that's often difficult to recognize, and maybe even more so for teachers with all the other responsibilities that they have. Okay, and also I hear you saying how important it is to engage young boys in the type of vocabulary needed.
Not only young boys, I think both. Because it's, for me, it's not the right approach just to target one group. You should target both groups, I think.
Both groups, okay, thank you for that. All right, so same question to you then, please, Sabrina.
Okay, so this is something that we've been looking at a lot in the Verge of Harming project, actually. So we came up with 4 things that we think from our interviews work really well when we're engaging young people. And that's the approach that we take to when we offer support. So whether accountability is supportive or punitive. We found that a lot of the time, if we're using a purely punitive approach, which may not often happen in services who are working with DA, but perhaps that's happening earlier on when they're in schools, we could escalate these harmful behaviours. So trying to make sure that a wider range of places are using a supportive approach to accountability, making sure that accountability is still there, but it's a supportive approach to it. As well as that, making sure that support is holistic. So we're looking at the whole of the young person that we're working with, looking at their past experiences, any elements of their culture or their mental health that might be interacting and might be important to think about, and also the whole of their community. So bringing in their family and other adults that they work with. Maybe they go down to boxing once a week, and how can we involve that adult as well that takes that, so that they've got risk management coming from all elements of their lives. Another thing that was really important was the environment in which the young people are having support. So is this feeling like a supportive, unjudgmental environment where they can go and they can ask questions and they can learn and they can get better? Obviously, there are cases where that's not the case, when it's higher risk. But if we're thinking about early intervention, there's a lot of times where young people aren't aware what they could have done better or how they could have approached the situation. So making sure they've got a space where they can go and question that. And then finally, the working relationship that we have with them when we're providing support is so important. A lot of young people might not have had a figure in their life that they can rely on. So making sure that we create that, but then we also don't just take that away when support ends, so that there's a step down, so that they don't have someone that they can go to and rely on, and then they leave their life. Making sure that they're ready for that ending of that relationship is also really important.
Okay, thank you for that, Sabrina. So you spoke there, the Verge of Harm project that you're working on. So the 4 pillars of support, how important it is to have accountability, but for that to be supportive is very important. The holistic whole family approach, and creating an environment whereby questions can be asked in a supportive way. Can we pause just a little bit there, because we are kind of flying through them. So actually we have a little bit of time there. I just wondered if at this point anyone would like to comment or to seek clarity on any of the points being made before we move on to the final question. Okay, everyone seems to be all right with everything. So we look at the last question then. So I guess we've looked at the challenges, we've looked at what is working well currently, and now into the future. In what direction does this work need to develop? Lena.
Okay, I would like to comment. Carolina was talking about there is a lot of adults around these young people. So we who are around these young people need to be a good bystander. We need to ask questions a lot more than we do around their relationship. So we can do a lot. Asking more, being more curious around what are they doing and how are they feeling and all things like that. Welcome. Okay. And then number 2, we need to educate, train professionals that already meet these young people, so they have their ears open so they can hear, okay, this maybe be abusive one. You need to talk to these people or this guy or girl around violence. So they ask the question, because if you don't ask question, they will not tell us. So, and then I think we need a lot of different methods to do this, because the one will not fit all. So now we have done a guideline, but we have to evaluate, and it's work in progress, and we need to do more about that. But I think we need a lot of ways of attack this problem.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So involving more people, involving more adults with teens. Also, I hear you saying it's not a case of one size fits all, that, you know, each case is individual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And the same to you then, Sylvia, in what direction does this work need to develop?
I think that we should think about prevention in a different way, or perhaps we have thinking about it for years now, but I think we should change more things. I think it's prevention of violence against children and youth. Yeah, especially also in a partnership, on a young partnership, it needs to focus on the victims and also on the offenders. So in Germany, I have the vision of Germany. So it's both are not working well together. Yeah, it's the two systems. Perhaps it's in other countries it's different, but we are two systems, and it's the responsibility of the professionals to work together in the regions or in the society, in the whole country. And it's Aufgabe, task, thank you, of the society and of the politics to fit it together, to put it together.
Okay, so what I hear you saying there is the prevention, the actual prevention work needs to be looked at, that you've got in Germany at least two systems. They are not working in tandem with one another, and more focus needs to be on that, on the prevention. Okay, right, thank you for that. Sorry, Iris, in what direction does this work need to develop?
I think that so many studies have shown like which is the impact that people suffer when they have intimate partner violence, but less studies shows like which is the phase that this impact might change in time. And according to the studies, there are like 3 different stages that this impact is changing over the time. So the first one is when in relationship, because that's the time when the victim experience direct impact, physical, social, and also mental. But then it's the phase during the separation, where many victims still continue to have the continuation of the abuse. And then it's after the separation, because that's mostly the time when the victim is marked by loneliness, trauma, and also follow damaged relationships. So understanding these impacts, and this also can transform the interventions during each stage. So one of the ways I see that is that it should be a clear plan for each of those 3 stages in order to have the right approach for the victim safety. And intervention can also assist the longer term well-being, and also help the recovery through post-traumatic growth. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. So yeah, understanding the impacts, intervention needed, the 3 stages of changing impacts. You mentioned when in a relationship, the direct impact, how the abuse continues in separation, and also after the impact of that. So the interventions needed. Anything we need to clarify with that? Is that clear with everyone? Yeah, okay. All right, so Sabrina then, that question to you, in what direction does this work need to develop?
Yeah, so one way that I think that it needs to develop is more of a nuance around young people's relationships. We're still mapping a lot from adult IPV onto young people. And we need to have more knowledge about what is different about, because we know there's so much that's different, but we need to know how that relationship develops differently for young people in order to be able to create interventions and support that is working for their relationships better, and in order to see which young people need support earlier on. Another way that I think work really needs to develop is around modeling more diverse relationships for young people. So most support is tailored to a heterosexual relationship. So we need more modeling and support around relationships that aren't heteronormative. We need, if we don't give young people the frameworks, they're trying to navigate these relationships without anything to model it on, without any knowledge of how to do this healthily. So we need to be providing young people with this. And another big thing is a space where they can go and do that, and they can go and question things, they can go and learn, and they can ask questions and get things wrong without it affecting anyone, without hurting anyone in a relationship. And that's really important, I think.
Lovely. Thank you, Sabrina. So a knowledge of young people's relationship, a place to speak out freely about the relationship, consistency of approach, I think you mentioned there, and more visible supports. Is that fair to say? Okay. All right. Well, that concludes the questions. So it's now over to you. The room is open, folks, for any questions to come in for our panelists. We have one here, yes?
Thank you. It was really interesting panel. I would like to know more about how families are included in the work with young perpetrators. So Sabrina was mentioning whole family approach. Maybe also other panelists have something to add, but actually what's the goal of these interventions? How do you do it? How you involve family?
Okay, so the mention of the holistic, the whole family approach, how would that work?
Yeah, so from the way I was talking about it is including the understanding that for a lot of young people that are going to go on and use harm, that harm might have been around in their home when they were growing up. So taking that into account when we're providing the support, do we need to include families in this support so that they're not going back to a home where they may be a victim of harm themselves? But also, are we working with parents to make sure that risk management is something, and safety planning is something parents are actually going to follow? If safety planning involves a parent turning their young child into the police, are parents going to do that because they obviously want to protect their child? They don't want a criminal record for them. So working with the parents to create something that's actually going to work.
Okay. Yes.
Do you experience any challenges in relation to working with parents, particularly in relation to the context of young people? Because of, I suppose, within the context of how to practice the society, their attitudes, their belief system, and that might impact on the intervention that will be done with individuals.
So one thing I'd say is that we know that a lot of parents might not want to accept that their child is using abusive behaviours towards someone else. And that could be a really big barrier in getting the young person to engage in support if the parents won't even accept it, and they might be victim blaming because they don't want their child to be the one causing the harm. So that is a huge barrier in working with parents, but we can only get past that if we involve the parents, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions for our panelists? Yes, sorry, we have one here coming in on our live stream.
So the question is about tackling the social media. Okay, give me a second. So the question is about tackling the social media aspects of online perpetration, of
Tackling the social media aspects of
Yes.
online.
Social media.
Okay. Social
in
media
early
aspects.
relationships, the social media aspects of it.
Okay. That stumped them.
Okay, give me a second.
$1 million.
So hiding the social media activities from parents. That's one of the things they wanted to know about.
Hiding the social media activities from parents.
Yes.
Any comments or responses to that?
Wow.
Or it's open to our audience as well. If
Yeah,
any of you have
help us
experience
out
of this,
here.
please speak out.
Just don't speak before you have a mic in your hand.
The mic is for the live streaming.
Perhaps I can say, yeah, it's for sure that violence also happens digital, or it especially for young people. Yeah, especially for young people, that the world is digital and not digital, and it's just mixed. So you can't separate it. Yeah, and so the violence happens on social media too. Yeah, and the studies show that it makes it worse, because so you can't close the door. Yeah, it's always present.
Yeah, so the idea with social media, so I guess if it's happening out in the open, it's visible on social media, it's happening to a child in their own bedroom possibly, and they're taking this all on themselves without anyone else actually knowing about it, the difficulties in that.
But I
Lena.
think it's one important thing is to talk about coercive control, because when young people, the guys that I have met, doesn't think that what I think is controlling, they don't think is controlling. And then they use it on, they do it everywhere, and they do it on the social media as well. So you have to discuss what is okay. And can you do that to another person? Can you expect that from another person? Is it okay to know where she is all the time? You have to talk more about that.
Right,
And then the digital is a new arena, the digital arena.
Yeah.
And it's more control, of course, but you need to talk about coercive control.
So the actual lack of awareness, I think, is what you're saying there, Lena,
Yeah,
with
and-
young people, that what they're doing is controlling. They're not thinking of it in that way.
Yeah.
As we would as adults. Yeah, Iris.
I just wanted to repeat what I said when I was doing the presentation of the first general recommendation, because we have to understand that online violence is a continuum of offline violence. So during the time that we were drafting the recommendation, we had several discussions with the women director on gender equality in Facebook. And she is coming from the women NGOs in the US. So she knows the narrative and she knows the problems and everything. And one of the things that they were facing as a challenge, it was to remove the content, especially when it comes for different languages, because you know that if you have a Facebook page in a language that is not like very common as English, German, French, or Italian or Spanish, and if you're coming for a country that is small, like Albania, Armenia, Estonia, then you face this challenge that somebody in India is checking the comments, and they are deciding if this is an abusive content or this is not. And most of the times, those people have not been trained in order to understand this gender problem that this status or this comment it has. So that's why I don't think that it is only one fight from the social networks on their own, but it is a fight that it should be fought from all the community. It should be fought from the young people themselves, from the teacher, from the parents, from everybody that is part of the community, because if we are not aware ourselves that this is wrong, then how can you teach to the other people that this is wrong? So that's why I'm saying that it should come with such a layered activities and approach. It should be coming also with a lot of capacity building on the law enforcement agencies, because you go to the policeman and he says, yeah, but it's only in Facebook. It's not harmful to you because he didn't put a slap to you. In fact, it's totally the difference, because if a slap is between two people, this pejorative connotation sentence, it's obvious for thousands of people. So the harm is more bigger when it comes to the online media than when it is in the offline world.
So is what's needed there, Iris, is more training of professionals then?
Training of the professionals, a lot of awareness and prevention activities. But I think that it should go hand by hand also with the prosecution of the cases, because sometimes we also learn from this.
All right, thank you for that. Yes, question here. Yeah, I'm so yes. Thank you.
It's a follow-up question. When you say prosecution, do you think it should be prosecution just of the perpetrators who are saying things on Facebook or other social media? Or do you think that we should be proactively addressing the media channels that are normalizing and facilitating abuse?
Okay, aggressively addressing the media channels.
Yeah, I think it goes hand by hand. It goes with the responsibility of the person that put the status, but also it goes with the responsibility of the media that is also acting like a voice for this message to be distributed. And there is this, now we also have a base because there is this European Court of Human Rights decision. I don't remember the case. But it is a deputy mayor who was running for the post of the mayor, and the former mayor had the pejorative status because of his religion. But the status in itself, de jure, it was okay. But the comments down, they were so bad, and some of them were really horrifying comments. So the European Court of Human Rights decided that the former mayor that published the status is also responsible for all the comments that incited hate because of his status. So I think that we also have a legal precedent now that you don't sue only the person that is making the comment, but also the person who incited the violence online.
Also suing the person who incited the violence. Yes.
I have a comment and then a question. My first comment relates to how do we deal with the social media and abusive behavior in adolescent relationships? And of course, the things that were mentioned here are important, but I would like to highlight one thing, and that was, I think, also mentioned by Carolina in the keynote speech, and that is the environment for these young people there. The social norm and their peers are so important, and we as professionals do not have an answer to that. How to mobilize, how to change the norm or build the norm that abusive behavior, whatever kind of, on social media is unacceptable. But that is not only in the relationship, but it is also about the bullying and so forth. And I think that is a big gap, that we do not have the mechanisms or the way to mobilize the response of the young people to what is happening to individuals who are exposed and so on. So that was my comment. But I also have, as I said, a question to the panelists, as coming back to the guiding questions. How do you see, or do you see the role of, you mentioned the role of the professionals and who work with the youth workers and so on. But how do you see the role of the school staff? And it was mentioned today early in the keynote that is where most of the kids spend most of the time. And that is where the norms and the values are very much affected also. And from our own experience in our work in Croatia, we were able to use the school environment, I'm not going to go into detail, to build awareness, as you said, and also other norms of behavior related to the healthy or unhealthy relationships. Thank you.
Okay, so how do we use schools to motivate?
Yeah, I can start. In Sweden, we
And we at MEN have done a lot of training with professionals at schools, and they are talking about respectful relationships and violence. And there are the teachers doing this, and this is a part of the curriculum, and they do it for a long time, and they started when they are 13, and then they're going to do this kind of discussions until they end the high school, and then they start in I don't know what you call it, high school. So we are doing that, this discussion, like the universal prevention intervention. So that's one way of
So
doing
that's
it.
already happening.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
your schools.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And not in every school, but a lot of schools.
Okay. All right. So just a couple of more questions then.
Should I answer? also
Yeah,
to
yeah,
school?
sure. Go ahead.
In Germany, also the schools are offering prevention of violence prevention, but it's they have to do such a lot. Yeah, so it's not the only thing, and it's really hard for them, I would say. Yeah, and they also have to make child and protection policies. So it's to prevent violence in their school, but also to get trained to cope with it. Yeah.
So this is being rolled out in schools in Germany, but the scale of the problem is so huge that it's very it's a very difficult task.
Situation is
Okay, so it's not being financially supported.
not enough.
Not enough. Okay. Yeah, Sabrina.
I'd just like to add to that, but I agree. Schools have a lot to do, and saying that it's schools' responsibility is really great, but we've got to make sure that they've got time to do it. But also, these teachers need to be trained to do it, because some of these teachers won't be in healthy relationships themselves. So if they're trying to provide information to young people, and they're not navigating a relationship healthily themselves, they don't know how to provide that to young people. So we need to make sure that, as well as making sure that schools have time to add this in, they're also trained to feel like they can do it comfortably as well.
Okay, so schools, teachers need to be trained properly to deliver this, some of whom may be even in abusive relationships themselves. So having that awareness and that training at that level is so, so important. Okay, thank you. Yeah, just really quickly then. Let's wait for the mic.
Hello, thank you. My name is Roman. I'm from Estonia. I don't know. Can you answer the question quickly? I want to pay attention on two aspects. The first one, maybe it's issue of the issues with mental health. And I want to ask, how do you think it needs to be approached in the work with the youth, because it can be depression, narcotics or alcohol abuse, hyperactivity disorder, and so on and so on.
Okay, so can we just take that for start? So young people, mental health issues, how best to approach that? In terms of abuse, do you mean young people who are behaving abusively, but who also have mental health issues?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a part of making sure that the support is tailored to that young person, because it does need to be taken into account. You know, also not just mental health, but does someone have a neurodivergence, which means that they're experiencing emotions more strongly, and they've never been diagnosed with this, they've never been told about this, they've never been told how to manage their emotions. So they're confused about why perhaps they're going through the world slightly differently. So these sorts of things do need to be involved in support, and we need to make sure that we take the time to get to know that young person when we're providing support, so that we can incorporate these things.
And I think that goes back to Lena's point of it's just not one size fits all, right? That these are individuals that we're talking about.
And the second question, it's about the applying of restorative justice practices. in the working with the youth. Can you see the place of applying these practices? And maybe you have such experience.
Restorative justice practices and applying that to the youth.
To the working with youth perpetrators,
Okay,
for
applying
helping
that to the
of
work with
taking
young
the
perpetrators.
responsibility and so on.
Anyone?
Thank you.
Restorative justice, anybody in the audience? Yes? Sorry, could you just wait for the mic? I'm sorry. Yeah, and if you could be as loud as you possibly can, please. The mic, just to remind you, is just for the Zoom, so.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some experience in 1 and 4 of doing restorative justice with sexual violence, not necessarily with youth, but with perpetrators and victims. And that I think works really well. I think the dangers are to do it properly. It's really resource intensive. You have to do it very carefully to protect the harmed person. It requires a lot of, the reason we stopped actually was because it was so resource intensive, but maybe with young people and not with sexual violence, it might be, much more doable. So.
Okay, all right. So resource intensive, therefore that presents its own difficulties. Okay, yeah.
Add to that, in the probation service, we do restorative justice interventions with perpetrators, if it's victim-led, obviously, in sexual violence cases. Typically, it works better where they're strangers to each other. I think there are complications and risks where there obviously are intimate partners. So in domestic violence, I think, be it young people or, when they're adults, there are more challenges because they may still be in a relationship with that person and, find it harder to make, they can't break from the individual as easily. So it is much more complex and the jury is out as to whether or not it actually is safe or beneficial in those kind of cases.
Is it safe, beneficial, is it not? We'll leave that question lingering in the room, I think, for you to ponder on overnight.